السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Mostly we go through the عبارة. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says ثم إن السقط من الإسناد قد يكون واضحا يحصل الاشتراك في معرفته ككون الراوي مثلا لم يعاصر من روى عنه، أو يكون خفيا فلا يدركه إلا الأئمة الحذاق المطلعون على طرق الحديث وعلل الأسانيد. فالأول وهو الواضح يدرك بعدم التلاقي بين الراوي وشيخه بكونه لم يدرك عصره أو أدركه لكن لم يجتمعا وليست له منه إجازة ولا وجادة، ومن ثم احتاج إلى تاريخ لتضمنه تحرير مواليد الرواة ووفياتهم وأوقات طلبهم وارتحالهم. وقد افتضح أقوام ادعوا الرواية عن شيوخ ظهر بالتاريخ كذب دعواهم. Until here we discussed the position in the number of missing links. So if the missing link is in the beginning, then it's called mu'allaq. If it is after the tabi'i, then it is called mursal. If there are two and it's consecutive, then it is called mu'dal. And if according to Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, what definition proposing for those who come after him is that if there is only one missing link, then you should rather use the word munqati'. Now Ibn Hajar rahimahullah discusses the missing links from another angle. He now looks whether the missing link is apparent or it is hidden. Is it such that anyone can know that there is a missing link, or you will have to do an in-depth study and you will have to be a master in the field, then only you would be able to notice that there is a missing link. So it is very apparent that there is a missing link if a person has to narrate from someone who lived in a completely different era, that this person passed away before the narrator was even born. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah explains that it is so obvious that everybody can notice it. Every person, from those who even have a little experience to those who are experts, they would all know that definitely this person did not meet the person who he is quoting from, because that person was only born after the one who is quoting from, after his death. So this here is very easy to detect. All you have to know is the date when the narrator was born, and when did the person who he is narrating from, when did he pass away. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah explains this here by saying ثم إن السقط من الإسناد قد يكون واضحا. He's saying that at times it is apparent. And Shaykh Ibrahim al-Lahim, he says ويسمى أيضا الجلي. So at times you can also call it jaliyan, that it is absolutely a clear. يحصل الاشتراك في معرفته, that everybody are partners, everybody take part in knowing in it. So the meaning of ishtirak is that everybody knows that they did not meet. So whether it is someone who is average in this field or whether it is an expert. In fact, even at times a student can easily identify that there is a missing link. And now he gives and Shaykh Ibrahim al-Lahim, then he says وَكُونُ هَذَا القسم واضحا جليا لا نعني أن معرفة ذلك جاءت بسهولة، لأن البحث في مواليد الرواة ووفياتهم ليس بالأمر السهل دائما. That we're saying that everyone can easily detect it, that Mullah al-Qari said بين الحذاق وغيرهم, whether it was the experts or whether it was those who are average in the field. Now you may note that we are not saying that it is a layman, because a layman might not be able to detect it. So someone who already now started to study in this field, a person who is, or maybe he got a little bit of experience. So what Shaykh Ibrahim al-Lahim is saying that earlier scholars would make lots of effort and they would dedicate lots of time trying to see the dates of birth and the dates of demise. And so all this here is for scholars who came after, because obviously those who are living in that period, they knew that a particular sheikh already passed away, and this guy is coming now and he's quoting that. So like, for example, in our times, if I have to quote from a Sheikh Zakaria, for example, now, then you will know that he passed away before I was even born. He passed away in 1980. So it's easy for the people in a particular era to know. But those who come now later on, they would have to make a lot of research. Scholars had to dedicate a lot of time, and thereafter they even would write books on it. Like, for example, Imam Bukhari, rahmallah, he wrote his Tariq, and it is printed with the name At-Tariq al-Saghir. But then the important point for quoting all of this here is that Sheikh Ibrahim Lahim says, وَكَثِيرًا مِمَّا ذَكَرَهُ يكون تحديد الوفاء على سبيل التقريب وربما جرى خلاف واسع في تحديد الولادة أو الوفاة. Back in those days, they didn't have birth certificates and ID books. And I told you before, like when we went for Jamaat to India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, when you ask a person's date of birth, so many places and so often it happens, especially if those who are older and in the gams, in the rural areas, you ask them, when is your, how old are you? They will say taqriban. That means approximately this is the age, because they didn't document that, they didn't write down the date. So in the past, this is the same thing which would happen, that many times it was just by estimate that this person was born around that day. You know, even for Imam Muslim, rahimahullah, there are different views on when he was born, yet he is such a famous scholar. So like that, there used to be different, there would be differences of opinion. In fact, even for the Prophet ﷺ himself, it is proven that he was born in Rabi al-Awwal or not. So like that, there would be different opinions, and وَرُبَمَا جَرَى خِلَافٌ وَاسِعٌ فِي تَحْدِيدِ الْوِلَادَةِ أَوْ الْوَفَاةِ. There would in fact sometimes be lot of discrepancies and lot of differences on stipulating when was the day that this person was born and when was the day he passed away. So it would be apparent, but it would be more apparent for those who are in that era. Those who came afterwards, for them they would have to do a little bit of study, and at times it would become a bit more blurry, and it would become a bit more difficult when there would be differences of opinion. In that case, then some scholars would say that there is ittisal, this person did meet their sheikh. Others would say no, there is no ittisal, and the person did not meet that particular sheikh. أو يكون خفيا فلا يدركه إلا الأئمة الحذاق المطلعون على طرق الحديث وعلل الأسانيد. The second type is where the narrator met the one who he is narrating from. And he even said in his lectures, he heard other narrations from him. So he didn't hear this particular narration. This specific narration which he is quoting, this narration he did not hear. Because obviously if you're sitting in, maybe say he heard that sheikh, in total he knows 500 narrations. And this person only heard 100 narrations. So definitely he's a student, he said he heard lots, hundreds of narrations. He heard, but that 400 which he did not hear, so maybe one of those narrations. So that specific narration which he is quoting now, he's quoting that 101st narration which he did not hear. So he did, that specific narration he did not hear directly from the sheikh. So this is so difficult to detect that even those who have experience in this field, they will experience difficulty. And it is in that light that Ibn Hajar is saying, أو يكون خفيا, that it is hidden. It's not so easy to detect that there is a missing link. Only those who are absolute experts in this field, they will be able to discover that there is a missing link here. Now Ibn Hajar explains these two types, and he says, فَالْأَوَّلْ وَهُوَ الْوَاضِحِ يُدْرَكُ بِعَدَمِ التَّلَاقِ بَيْنَ الرَّاوِي وَشَيْخِهِ. That the first type which is apparent, how would you know it? You know for sure that the rawi, the narrator, him and his sheikh, they did not meet. Because he passed away before the sheikh, the sheikh passed away before he was even born. Now here there is a question, is that if it is so clear that he did not meet him, then how is Ibn Hajar rahmallah calling him a sheikh, saying wa shaykhihi? Can I say that, for example, Zakaria Kanlawi rahmallah is my ustad? I can't say, because it's obvious that I was not even born. So in the same ways, how is Ibn Hajar saying wa shaykhihi? So to answer the siyah, Sheikh Ibrahim Lahim responds and says, سماه شيخا له بناء على سورة الإسناد الظاهرة وهذا يستعمله الأئمة وهو نوع من التجوز. That apparently looking at it, because he is the one who is making it seem like it is his sheikh. That by using these words and narrating directly from him, he is making it look like it as if this is his teacher. And he's saying that scholars would use this kind of terms, and it is used metaphorically. وَهُوَ نَوْعٌ مِنَ التَّجَوُّزِ. It is used majazan like this here. وَإِلَّا فَهُوَ لَيْسَ شَيْخًا لَهُ فِي الْحَقِيقَةِ. Obviously, you cannot say that it is his sheikh. Thereafter he mentions وَتَرَى الْمِزِّ فِي تَهْذِيبِ الْكَمَالِ تَحَاشَى هَذَا فِي تَرَاجِمِ الرُّوَاةِ. That Allama Mizzi, rahimahullah, you know that in Tahzib al-Kamal, where he gathers all the ruwat, so there he made it a point to stay away from this here, and he would say rawa anhu or ruwiya anhu. These are the words. Rawa an, that these scholars narrate from him, and he narrates from these scholars. So that is what the wording which he would use. He wouldn't say that these are his teachers and these are his students. He would say that they narrate. لأنه قد يكون في من سيريده من لم يسمع منه المترجم له. And thereafter he explains that there is a recent scholar, so he doesn't take his name. He just said there's a recent scholar, and he altered the words of Allama Mizzi rahmallah, and he said وَمِن شُيُوخِهِ and وَمِن تَلَامِذَتِهِ. So to use this kind of word will be incorrect unless a person knows that they are being used metaphorically. So we presented the scenario where the narrator was only born after the death of the one who he is quoting from. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions this is one way to prove that they did not meet. بِكَوْنِهِ لَمْ يُدْرِكْ عَصْرَهُ. They lived in different eras. They were not contemporaries to each other. But then he presents another way, and he says, أَوْ أَدْرَكَهُ لَكِنْ لَمْ يَجْتَمِعَا. He's saying that maybe they lived in the same era, they lived in the same time, but they did not meet. So it's not proven that they ever met. The one is living in the east and the other one is living in the west. Allama al-Qani rahmallah says, أو تكون جهتاهما مختلفين كخراسان. You know, Khurasan is in the east. Andalus, and Andalus is this side in the west. So they're living in completely different parts of the world. And that's the one thing, that they're living in different parts. But then they could have traveled. So then he said, وَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ أَنَّ أَحَدَهُمَا رَحَلَ إِلَى جِهَةِ الْآخَرِ. It's not proven that the one ever traveled to the locality or to the place or to the city where the other one lives. So Mullah Ali Qari then also says, وَكَذَلِكَ أَمْكِنَةُ حَيَاتِهِمْ وَمَمَاتِهِمْ. That they lived in different places and they even passed away in different places. Their native places are different, and it's not proven that they ever met. So when you're saying it's not proven that they ever traveled, then it also should not be proven. You look at the dates or the years in which they perform Hajj, because it's very common, and right up until today, it's very common where when you go for Hajj or you go for Umrah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us over and over, then it's very common that you will look for which shuyukh. So whenever we go, we always make a point. You try to detect, you ask others which shuyukh are presently here, and that's the best way. So many shuyukh, I met them personally in today's times in Medina Munawwara or in Mecca, because they are in Mecca, especially during Hajj, because many senior ulama come for Hajj. So then you make it a point to go and meet those ulama. So that's the one thing you prove, that they didn't perform Hajj in the same year, because then there's great chances that they would meet, especially in today's times when you're talking of millions of people for Hajj, and yet students make it a point to meet senior scholars. So you can imagine in those times when the Hajj numbers were more smaller. But besides that also, you need to prove that they didn't both travel at the same time to meet a particular sheikh. So, you know, in those times that they didn't have Skype and all these internet calls, etc. So they had to travel, and traveling was so common for them. And so it shouldn't be proven that both of them were at Baghdad, for example. So although the one is from Khurasan and the other one is from Andalus, but it shouldn't be proven they both were in Baghdad at the same time or in Kufa at the same time. It should there shouldn't be evidence that they met the same sheikh. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions these two ways, which makes the missing link very apparent, that the narrator lives in a different era from the one who is quoting from, and they both lived in the same at the same time, but there's no proof that they ever met. Now on the second type which we're discussing here, that أو أدركه لكن لم يجتمع, that they were in the same time, but it's not proven that they met. There is an objection on this type here. Because if you look on the next page, you see that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he discusses al-qism al-thani wa huwa al-khafi, and thereafter he divides it into two types. So the first type is al-mudallas, and then after that he says وَكَذَا الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِي. So now look at this definition of al-mursal al-khafi. It's on the last line of the next page. If you're using a different print, then you just look few paragraphs ahead, you can see that it's written وَكَذَا الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِي. So you can see it's under وَالْقِسْمُ الثَّانِي وَهُوَ الْخَفِي, and even the name al-mursal al-khafi. Khafi means hidden. So he says إِذَا صَدَرَ مِن مُعَاصِرٍ لَمْ يَلْقَ مَنْ حَدَّثَ عَنْهُ بَلْ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهُ وَاسِطَةٌ. So you can see here the definition which he is giving for mursal al-khafi is exactly what he is mentioning here under Jali. So that obviously shows that he is contradicting himself. That there is mentioning that it's hidden because obviously since they were living in the same time, how do we know that they do not meet? Obviously not every person's travels are recorded. Maybe they did travel and maybe it wasn't even written. That time there was no Instagram and Twitter to show off that you're traveling. At that time, maybe they could have traveled and it was very hidden. So therefore he's mentioning it under al-mursalul khafi. So this here is one place where Ibn Hajar rahmallah contradicts himself. Sheikh Khudair brings this point also, and he says وَقَوْلُ الْحَافِظُ رحمه الله في النزهة أو أدركه لكنه ما لم يجتمع فيه نظر لأن هذا من السقط الخفي على ما سيأتي تقريره في المرسل الخفي. So this point here which he says أو أدركه لكن لم يجتمع, it should not be mentioned here unless you are reading it in the full sentence together with the exception which he mentions there. وَلَيْسَتْ لَهُ مِنْهُ إِجَازَةٌ وَلَا وِجَادَةٌ. Now here, so this is discussing the apparent type. Now a question could come about that what's the terminology for it? That when a person, the first link he left out, then you call it mu'allaq. If it was the link after the tabi'i, you call it mursal. If they were two consecutive, he called it mu'adhal. If it was one missing link at different stages or at one place, then it's called munqati'. But here he's not giving us any terminology or any term for this here. So Allama al-Qani rahmallah says na'am, yes, he's not giving any terminology, but he says that Allama Baqa'i rahmallah said إن هذا القسم لا اسم له إلا المنقطع. That this when it's very apparent, then there is no specified or dedicated meaning for it. It will just be called منقطع. وإن كان من أول السند من تصرف مصنف سمي معلقا. If it is right at the first link in the sanad, then you can call it معلقا. So that's what Allama Baqa'i rahmallah mentioned. So then extending on it, Allama al-Qani says وَالَّذِي يَظْهَرُ دَخُولُهُ أَيْضًا فِي بَابِ الْمُعْضَلِ وَالْمُرْسَلِ. You will see if it's two missing links, then you will just call it mu'dhal. So it's apparent that there are most definitely two missing links, then you can call it mu'dhal. Or if it's very apparent that it's a tabi'i and then he's narrating from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So everybody knows, for example, Hasan Basri rahmallah, if he has to say qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or take a younger tabi'i like Imam Zuhri rahimahullah, then you can call it, so it's apparent, undoubtedly it's 100% apparent, but you can call it mursal. So you're using those terminologies. والحاصل أن هذا القسم ليس له اسم خاص لجريانه في الأبواب السابقة, that all those previous terminologies will apply to this year. فينظر لمحل ذلك الحذف الواضح ويحكم له بما يلحق به من مسميات تلك الألقاب السابقة وتطلق عليه أسماؤها من تعليق أو انقطاع. You will use those terminologies if it's معلق or منقطع أو عزل أو إرسال. Then so now he makes this exception. He says وَلَيْسَتْ لَهُ مِنْهُ إِجَازَةٌ وَلَا وِجَادَةٌ. So this is an exception that it should not be proven that the person has ijazah or that there is wijada. Now what is this here? So a person could be living in a different place from that contemporary. Like we're saying, the one could be in the east, the one could be in the west. There could be a huge distance between them, but there could be some correspondence through them. Yes, there wasn't WhatsApp and there wasn't emails, but definitely they could write letters to one another. Maybe they were, we mentioned now that there were scholars used to travel. So maybe there was a caravan leaving from Khorasan, students leaving and going and meeting with those scholars. So maybe he must have told them that, look, you're going and you're meeting such a great sheikh, please ask him to give ijazah to me. So that's very possible. So the sheikh in that distant land, then he could have jotted down a few of his narrations and he could have granted permission. So this here is called ijazah. When we come to page 128, inshallah, of this print of ours, then we will do more about the various types of ijazah and the ruling of ijazah, etc. And we will discuss it all in detail. But for now, just understand that it means the ijazah is where a teacher gives permission to a student who has not heard directly from him. So since there is a clear ijazah, Ibn Hajar rahmallah excludes this here. He's saying because now it's going to be muttasil. The narration will be muttasil because the sheikh is giving ijazah. So one is where you verbally say, and one is where the sheikh writes down and signs it and says that I am given. In fact, that at times, we'll do when we come to that. Some scholars would feel that it's actually stronger than going and sitting in the company of the sheikh and listening to it directly. Why? Because here it's documented, it's written. So the chances of mistake, you can memorize it, you can read it 10 times. When he says it verbally, if your mind wandered, or maybe you thought about something else, maybe you wouldn't grasp fully what he's saying, maybe you wouldn't, it's you only hearing it at one time, maybe you could make a mistake. So some scholars would say that ijazah, it's written down, and also here, because he's signing it. So this here is also like, how we have certificates in our times. It's concrete evidence that he did get this narration. Otherwise, a person could lie and he could say that I heard from that particular sheikh. Meantime, he did not hear from him. So that's ijazah. Now, Ibn Hajar is saying that even though they did not meet, but because there is ijazah, it will be regarded as muttasil. Then the second type is wijada. Now again, for wijada, there is a dedicated chapter, although it's only a few lines, but it's a dedicated chapter for it on page 127. So we'll discuss it in more detail there. But the wijada is where a book is found with narrations. And this here is an important thing that the sheikh wrote that he gives ijazah. Now in that time there wasn't publishing houses and stuff. So like in today's time now you pick up a kitab of maybe one sheikh and now you think that because it's his kitab you automatically got ijazah. So in that time the sheikh would actually write, and this is how they would recognize it through handwriting, etc. So he writes there and he also puts that I am giving ijazah to that particular person. So Ibn Hajar mentions that in these two cases, even though there was no meeting between the contemporaries, but the sanad will be regarded as muttasil, and therefore these are two exclusions. Commenting on this, Alama Laqani rahmallah says, افترز به عما لو كان له منه إجازة وجادة فإنه حينئذ يكون من قسم المتصل لا من قسم المنقطع والله أعلم. But then Mullah Al-Qari rahmallah remarked that this year, if there's ijazah or wijada, then it's actually kind of hidden, because not everybody would know. Like, if you have to travel, say for example, if you travel and come all the way to South Africa, now everybody will know that you studied in an institute here in South Africa. But if now you didn't travel, and if someone just wrote and gave you ijazah, people could doubt it. So it's actually kind of hidden. So this is what Ibn Hajar, Shaykh Mullah Al-Qari rahmallah says, لكن عده من الواضح لا يخلو عن خفاه فكأنه أمر إضافي. That it's actually hidden. It's not entirely apparent. Now, as we said that ijazah is an essential condition for wijada, and Ibn Hajar rahmallah himself mentions it under the chapter. He says, وَكَذَا الشَّرَطُ الْإِذْنَ فِي الْوِجَادَةِ وهي أن يجر بخط يعرف كاتبه ويعرف كاتبه فيقول وجدت بخط فلان ولا يسوغ فيه إطلاق أخبرني بمجرد ذلك إلا إن كان له منه إذن بالرواية عنه. And he says وأطلق قوم على ذلك فغلطوا. So we'll discuss all of that, but based on that, Alama Munawi rahmallah now says قال بعضهم ولا بد أن تقترن الوجادة بالإجازة فهي أخص. That here when he's mentioning, he should say ليست له منه إجازة ولا وجادة. He couldn't just mention وجادة مطلقا like this. He was supposed to specify it. فكان ينبغي, or if not specifying it, then فكان ينبغي تقديمه لكنه جرى على طريقة بل لا يشترط فيه الإجازة. Now as for the Hanafi approach to all of this here, so firstly mentioning a wijada and putting a wijada and ijazah in the same category, with regards to this here, Radiyuddin ibn al-Hanbali said, وَمَفْهُومُ كَلَامِ قَاضِي الْقُضَاءِ أَنَّ الْوِجَادَةَ كَالْإِجَازَةِ فِي اتصال الإسناد. But then after he quotes Kamal ibn Abi Sharif, وهو ممنوع لأن الرواية بالوجادة لا اتصال معها. نعم العمل بالوجادة محل خلاف حكي عن الشافعي الأمل بها. So you can see Ibn Hajar is mentioning this because in the Shafi'i madhab, but there is great differences. وقال به طائفة من نظار أصحابه ونصره إمام الحرمين واختاره غيره ومنعه معظم المحدثين. So he's saying that majority of the muhaddithin, they are not going to accept this exclusion which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning here. So he mentions about the Malikis and others besides the Malikis. And then with regards to the Hanafi view, he says ظاهر توضيح أصولنا وغيره أن مع بعض طرق الإجازة وكذا بعض طرق الوجادة وهو المعمول به اتصالا. And then he quotes from التلويح. So basically in the Hanafi madhab, this exclusion is there is scope for this exclusion, and this exclusion is based more on the Shafi'i madhab. But according to Muhaddithun and according to Malikis, etc., they're not going to accept this here, because even if there's Ijāzah and even if there's Wujada, they're going to say that there's still a missing link, there's still inqita', and therefore they are going to regard it as mardud. Ibn Hajar rahmallah now says ومن ثم احتيج إلى التاريخ لتضمن تحرير مواليد الرواة ووفياتهم وأوقات طلبهم وارتحالهم. That based on all of this, it's essential that a student has to learn history. Why? Because when he's learning the history of the various narrators, then he will know the date of birth, he will know the date of demise, he will know the period in which they went to seek knowledge, when they traveled to certain lands, وارتحالهم, their journeys, etc. So Alama Khatib rahmallah, he quotes the famous statement of Sufyan Thawri, لما استعمل الرواة الكذب استعملنا لهم التاريخ. When narrators started to lie, we started to use tarikh, we started to detect their lies by proving to them. And before that he mentioned an incident, and he says from Ufair bin Ma'adan, he says that قدم علينا عمر بن موسى حمص, that Umar bin Musa, he came to Hims to meet us. So in Hims there was the qabr of Khalid bin Walid. Alhamdulillah, we had the opportunity of going there, but now I don't know, maybe if it's bombed out or what. So he's saying that Umar bin Musa came to Hims. فَجْتَمَعْنَا إِلَيْهِ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ. So we sat in the masjid, went to listen to him. And now he's saying, حَدَّثَنَا شَيْخُكُمُ الصَّالِحِ, that your pious sheikh has narrated to us. So he's using the word حَدَّثَنَا. He's not even using the word an. So he continuously said it one time, two times. فَلَمَّا أَكْثَرَ, and he started to use it many times. قُلْتُ لَهُ مَنْ شَيْخُنَا هَذَا الصَّالِحِ سَمِّهِ لَنَا نَعْرِفُهُ. Who's the pious sheikh of ours that you're continuously quoting? So he didn't know that maybe someone is going to ask this. So he thought he'll be able to firstly hide. But now he was questioned. So then he said Khalid ibn Ma'adan. He took the name of Khalid bin Ma'adan. So then Ufair bin Ma'adan told him, that in which year did you hear him? Like we said earlier, that for contemporaries to detect it is very simple, because they know that this sheikh passed away some time back. You're so young, and he passed away some time back. So he said, لَقِيتُهُ السَّنَةَ 800, that I met him in the year 108 Hijri. So then I already, so Ufair bin Ma'adan is saying, I already knew his line, but I continued, فَأَيْنَ لَقِيتُهُ, where did you meet him? So he said, لَقِيتُهُ فِي غَزَاةِ أَرْمَيْنِيَّةٍ, that I met him in that. So then I told him, اتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَا شَيْخ وَلَا تَكْذِبْ. In front of all the students, in front of everybody in that masjid, he's telling the guests, because this person came to meet them, that fear Allah, don't lie. مات خالد بن معدان سنة 400 وأنت تزعم أنك لقيته بعد موته ب4 سنين. He passed away in 104, and you are saying that you met him in 108. That's the first thing. And وأزيدك أخرى, the second thing is لم يغزو أرمينيا, he never even go for that war. كان يغزو الروم, he only fought against the Romans. Now here, one thing which to point out is, you can see he's saying that he passed away in the year 104. So you know from that point which he spoke about earlier, that there are differences on the dates of demise. So if you have to look, another liar, he also falsely attributed something to Khalid bin Ma'adan. So in this incident of Ufair, we see that he's saying he passed away in the year 104. But in Al-Markhal ila al-Iklil, Imam Hakim rahmallah narrates another incident, And here, Ismail bin Ayyash, he says that he passed away in 106. So Ismail bin Ayyash, he says, كنت في العراق, I was once in Iraq, and فأتاني أهل الحديث فقالوا ها هنا رجل يحدث عن خالد بن معدان. That is a person narrating from Khalid ibn Ma'dan, the same person who that other guy was quoting from. فأتيته فقلت له, I went to him and I said to him, أي سنة كتبت عن خالد بن معدان? In which year did you write all this? So he said, سنة 13 يعني و100, in the year 113 Hijri. فقلت أنت تزعم أنك سمعت من خالد بن معدان بعد موته ب7 سنين. So you can see how it was estimate that he's saying in 113, so he's saying 7 years. And thereafter Ismail bin Ayyash said, Mata Khalid sana 6 و100, he passed away in the year 106. But that other narrator said 104. So you can see in this way they would differ in the dates, because it was all estimate. Like we say, there were no birth certificates, it wasn't documented. And then in this last chapter, in Al-Madkhal ila al-Iklil, Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he narrates, لما قدم علينا أبو جعفر محمد بن حاتم القشي وحدث عن عبد بن حميد سألته عن مولده. That when this person, Abu Ja'far Muhammad bin Hatim, came, he started to narrate from Abd bin Humayd. So I asked him that, when were you born? So he said, I was born in the year 260 Hijri. So then I told all my companions there that سمع هذا الشيخ من عبد بن حميد بعد موته ب13 سنة. That he's saying that he heard from Abd bin Humayd after 13 years after his demise. So again, yeah, either there is a different view on the days on which Abd bin Humayd passed away, because 260 minus 13 equals 247. But everybody knows that Abd bin Humayd passed away in the year 249. Or maybe it is just an estimate. So it's actually 11 years. So in this way, scholars were able to detect that there were missing links. And the reason is simple, that liars and hypocrites, they were not learned. They didn't have time to go and study all the different. They were just trying to pull a fast one. They were trying, to push the luck. So Ibrahim al-Lahim, he says, وَغَالِبُ الْكَذَّابِينَ لَا يَعْرِفُونَ تَوَارِيخ وَلَادَةِ وَوَفَاةِ الرُّوَاةِ وَالْأَئِمَّةُ يَعْرِفُونَها. So therefore, Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying that it's essential to acquaint yourself with the dates of birth and the dates of demise. Al-Imam Munawi, he quotes Al-Imam Humaydi rahmallah is saying that there are 3 things which you should master. The first is al-ilal, finding out all these hidden defects. And he's saying that the best kitab is Imam Darqutni rahmallah. Then the second one is where they have the same names and they are different people. So he's saying that the best kitab is Ibn Makula. And then he's saying that the third thing which you should master is the dates of demise. But he's saying, وَلَيْسَ فِي kitab, there's no kitab written. So Imam Munawi says maybe his meaning that there is no kitab which is extensive, because there are kitabs which are written. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah then concludes this here and he says, وَقَدْ افتضح أقوام ادعوا الرواية عن شيوخ ظهر بتاريخ كتب دعواهم. That there are many people who disgrace themselves. They try to say that they heard from certain shuyukh, and once you study the dates of birth and the dates of demise, you find that they did not meet. Under another chapter, an-Naḍar rahmallah says, you can see saying that they disgrace themselves. So an-Naḍar said in Al-Muqida, وَلَيْ يَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَعَانَاهُ. That that's where you start to lie about your shuyukh. You start to say that I heard from a particular sheikh and I met this sheikh. Meantime, we didn't even see him. So he's saying, لَيْ يَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَعَانَاهُ. The practice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He will never grant such a person success. وَقَلَّ مَنْ سَتَرَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ مِنْهُمْ. You know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sattar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conceals all our other sins. But he's saying this particular sin, because it's the preservation of deen, is very seldom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow this sin to be concealed. That Allah ta'ala will most definitely unveil and expose that those people who lie. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَفْتَضِحُ فِي حَيَاتِهِ. Many of them, they are disgraced in their very lives. That you can see from these instances which we quoted. You can imagine after they told him that, after Imam Hakim told him that 13 years after his demise you were born. Imagine how red, how embarrassed he must have been. Imagine that he was regarded as a guest there. Everybody is sitting by him. Imagine how much he must have been honoring him, taking hadith from him. And thereafter Ufair exposed him, or Ismail bin Ayyash exposed him. Imagine how embarrassing it must have been. So in their very lives, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَفْتَضِحُ بَعْدَ وَفَاتِهِ. But others, they get exposed after their death. فَنَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ السِّتْرَ وَالْعَفْوَ. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. And with the dua of Imam Dhahabi, we conclude this lesson. Inshallah, we'll continue on Thursday. Until then, Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.